Hello, this is Mark Denham, radio presenter, audio producer, podcaster, and voiceover. And today we are looking again at compression, part 5. And so far we've looked at the single band compressor, either using the dynamics effect, which you can get to from amplitude and compression dynamics. You'll see that has a compressor in it, also a gate, an expander, and a limiter. That's one way of doing it. And the way we've looked at most likely so far is using the single band compressor with your threshold, your ratio, your attack, your release, and your output gain. That's the way we've done this so far. And here we have a basic voiceover that's recorded through the DBX286S with a little bit of compression applied at source. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And we're looking at the multiband compressor now. Now, I've got the preview window open so you can see the changes that we are making. And if I open this up here, I'm on the broadcast preset here, and listen to the difference this has now made. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. Just by turning that off midway through it, you can see and hear the difference. See it in that waveform, hear it in your ears. And that is one of the presets here. There are other presets as well. Pop Master is another one. Now, before I show you, look here. These are the bands that you are affecting with each of your settings here. So this is the low band here, which is being affected by these settings. And you'll recognize these, the threshold, the ratio, the attack, the release, and the output gain. All things that we have looked at so far in the single band compressor. So it's all familiar, but the single band compressor applies compression across the entire audio spectrum. So if you have a speech based thing that you are compressing, a voiceover, for example, that would make more sense, wouldn't it, rather than a speech-based thing. But if you have a voiceover you are compressing and you use the single band compressor, then if you set your threshold at -20 and your ratio at 3, your attack and your release, that applies right from the very, very low sounds to the very, very high sounds. Using the multiband compressor here, you are affecting each bit of the audio differently by these bands that you can indeed define yourself. You can move that around. That's your low band, and you can move it around how low it is and then how high up the audio spectrum that gets. All right. So if we go back to the broadcast preset here, we'll just have a little look. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And there is your broadcast. If we look at Pop Master, you can see these bands have moved, so you will get a slightly different sound. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And that's because each of these is working differently on a different band. I'm going to set it up now at default. Okay, so we're back to the uncompressed voice. This is a sample of... There we are, back to the uncompressed voice. And I'm going to look at, let's say, 120. So 120, I'll set -20 as my threshold. I will set my ratio at 2:1, my attack at 5:1, my release at 100:1, and we don't need any makeup gain on that, okay? So this is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. We've not made too much difference as yet because there isn't much in that audio that's underneath 120. Certainly, on my processor, I have everything under 80 rolled off anyway, so there's no real bass rumble in there at all. Now we'll look at the lower mid-range. So this is affecting up to 2000. So between 120 hertz and 2000 hertz, we are now affecting that. So we'll have a look at -20, and we'll leave everything else the same. And you'll see here minor changes to the audio. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And then again, we'll set here the higher mid-range to -20, 2:1. And for the highs, just because we don't want really to be sounding horrible and sibilant, I'm going to go slightly different on the highs. And we are affecting here anything above 10,000 hertz. What we've done now is we've set a threshold of -30, which means that any frequency above 10,000 that gets above -30 will be compressed 2:1. Whereas everything else here will be compressed at -20 at a ratio of 2:1. So this is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And there you go. That doesn't sound too bad at all. What we have done, though, as you can see, minorly, we have affected the level here. So let's work on just adding a bit of gain across the spectrum on all of these. And we'll just add minor gain because I don't want to get anything that's ridiculous and pulsing. And you can see here now that we are starting to make a bit of difference to that audio. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. Now that's not brutal at all. That is the sort of compression that you could use very, very lightly if you are using it in your vocal chain. I would recommend probably not. Use the single band compressor in your vocal chain, and then if you do need to use the multiband compressor, use it at the end in your master track. Okay, so let's just have a listen with it on and with it off. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. We've not made that much difference, if I'm honest. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. We've not made that much difference because we've not been drastic. But if I start here, let's say with the broadcast compressor, okay, and then if I was to move this up, all right, now listen to the sound here. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. I have a feeling, if I'm honest here, that the preview window is not updating because that should be a very, very different waveform. Let's get rid of the preview window and reopen the preview window, and still it's not updating. So the preview window is now absolutely not working. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop Audition, restart Audition, and we'll do this with a working preview window. Hold on. Right, so there we are. Adobe Audition is reopened now. And hopefully, if we go back in now, the preview window will, yes, it'll show us the difference there in that audio. This is a sample, and you can see by applying that broadcast preset. Now, if I was to move, let's say, this down, it's going to have very little effect on the low now because I moved it down to a point where theoretically I've already rolled off most of those frequencies in my recording. This is a sample of how powerful the but then if I move it up, this is a sample of how powerful the you can see those different bands. So we'll go back to default here. Again, this is where you have to be careful with this. If I was to set this as a threshold of -40 and -40, I am now taking out virtually all of the mid-range of this audio. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And you can see it working there. The reduction is pulsing away on those two. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And you can hear what I've done now is I've left just a sound that is basically low end and high end because I have over-compressed the mid. Again, go back to the default here. And if I go back to the default here, if I was, say, to move this band and move that band, it will have a minor effect on the sound. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And if I move down this one as well, to there, let's have a little listen now. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. Now, the other thing is, if we go back to default, and we'll set this up very, very quickly here, -20, -20, -20, and -30. Let's just set this up very, very quickly. You may be thinking, right, I don't want it to be too boomy, so you'll set perhaps a high compression ratio on your mid, on your low, sorry, you'll set a real high compression ratio on your mid, and we'll just add some output gain in here just to boost up the audio when we have finished now. And then you're thinking, do you know what, like mid-range, I don't want to be too boxy mid, so maybe I'll have 3-to-1 there and 2-to-1 in that higher mid once you're getting up into the clarity side of the mid. If you look like, say, the low frequency will often give you the power. That's where the real boomy resonance comes from. You don't want to be boomy, but you know what I'm saying. That's where the power comes from. The lower mid also contributes to that. Higher mid will contribute to the clarity of it. If you think of just a basic graphic equalizer on your car stereo where you've got low and you've got high, if you pump up the low, you get boom, boom, boom. But if you pump up the high, then you get the clarity, you get the tss, tss, tss. When you put them together the right way, that is when you've got the right thing here. So the lower mid contributes towards the more boomy sound. So this is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. You can see there, we're not really touching the low because most of that is rolled off anyway at 80 Hertz, but there is a bit of compression working here. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. And that is basically how this works. The one other thing that you can do here, you have a gain, which obviously is a master makeup gain. So if I boost that up by 10, this is a sample of how powerful the we are clipping, okay? Turn on the brick wall limiter. We are not clipping. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. So, you know, again, there are many settings here. If you do want to use this, I would urge you not to stick it in unless you're going to put really, really light compression. I would urge you not to stick it in your vocal chain, but to use it on a final production. If, say, you're making a radio demo and perhaps you've just recorded your links off the desk onto the recording bus and they're not processed in any way, then yeah, mix it up, put some songs on, put your vocals on, mix it down, and then apply perhaps a little bit of broadcast compression here in the multiband compressor, and that'll be fine. But, you know, if you are going to use it in your vocal chain, then number one, take the time to learn it. Like, learn the different effects of compressing the different bits of each of these. You know, like we have just gone really, really light here. So you're making a massive impact on your audio, whether it's voice, whether it's music, you are making a massive impact. Again, you can do it with music as well. This is our favorite bit of non-copyright music. Now that's already fairly heavily compressed. I've still got the preview window open, so I'll go into the multiband compressor, and that's already fairly heavily compressed, and therefore not much difference is actually being made here at all by doing this. But if we then go in now and we take off that altogether, leave that as normal, and if we create a multi-track session now, no template needed, and what we'll do is we'll drag in our voice, we'll have the music as well, and this is a sample. I'm not really worried at this point in time that you can't actually hear it. This is a Hang on. Right, not really worried at this point in time that you can't hear it. I'll add some processing to that. So let's just do this manually. For the point of this, we will just do this manually, and we'll bring the volume down, minus 20 decibels. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. There we are, speech is finished, and we'll stick that back up again there. And we'll just do a very, very basic. Right, okay, we'll do a cut there, get rid of that, fade that out. And that's very, very basic, okay? And you can see now what we've got here. If we mix this down in its entire session, there's the start of the music, which is quite quiet. The voice will come in, and then away goes the music. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. Not very well mixed, but it will highlight indeed what we want to know here. Multiband compressor, and look at the preview window using the broadcast. It's dragging up these quiet bits, and you'll be able to appreciably hear the difference. This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. Now you can hear how that's dragged that all up and made it sound much more radio-like, but the one thing that you need to bear in mind, and I said this here, is that you can, I've said this on multiple occasions, you can over-compress the audio. We have just created this with a bit of single band compression here. This is a sample of how powerful the... And if I just turn off that single band compressor... This is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. Only a subtle difference, but when you add the two together and you go down to your final mix down here, this is a sample of how powerful the multiband compressor can be. You get a very, very compressed sound there. So yeah, do you know what? If you do want to use the multiband compressor, remember it is very powerful. Use it sparingly. There are a lot of presets in there which will help you get started and hopefully help you understand the setting of the different bands and the setting of the compressor for each band, because it's just basically a single band compressor split into single band compressors that only affect certain parts of the audio. That's all the multiband compressor is a series of single band compressors working on different parts of the audio spectrum. Learn it and use it. It will be of benefit to you. Don't overuse it, but make sure before you do use it, you learn it and you use it well. There you go. As always, if you have any questions, markdenham.com. You can visit the website and you will be able to ask your questions there on the contact tab. You can also, if you're watching this on YouTube, stick a question underneath in the comments and I will get back to you with that as well. Coronavirus continues to ravage the world. I do have my own studio at home, so if you do need any voiceovers or anything like that, more than happy to help. Again, you can find all the details on that on my website, markdenham.com, where you will find the entire audio journey so far. Have fun with what we've learned today. Go away and produce some amazing audio.